This is our weekly class where we study a maamar, a Hasidic discourse from the original text, word by word, from the Rebbe. This week we're starting a new maamar, a new discourse, called Basi LeGani. There are many maimarim from the Rebbe with the same name, Basi LeGani. And the way that we differentiate between one Basi LeGani and another Basi LeGani is by naming the year. So we're going to learn Basi LeGani Tafshin Mem Daled, 5744. But let me just explain a little bit of background. Now, I could use the entire class just giving background, but I don't want to do that. I want to try to do this in less than 5 minutes, the background part. The sixth Rebbe of Chabad, who was known as the Rebbe Rayatz, the only child of his father, the fifth Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, came to America in 1940, and for the last 10 years of his life in this physical world, he lived in Brooklyn in 770 and brought Lubavitch to America and started basically the movement that we know of as Lubavitch in the modern world, with all the outreach and the network of shluchim that all began in those 10 years. And during the majority of those 10 years, his son-in-law, who was called the Ramash, who later became his successor, the seventh Rebbe, was his secretary and was involved in all of the groundwork of all of the institutions that were established during those 10 years. And after the passing of the Rebbe Rayatz, or who we call the predecessor Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, in 1950, there was a year period where there was not yet an official Rebbe. And after that, exactly 1 year period, on the first yortzeit of the predecessor Rebbe, the Rebbe accepted the Nesius, the leadership. The date is Yud Shvat, the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat. So Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud, 1950, is the Histalkus, the passing of the predecessor Rebbe. Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph, 1951, exactly 1 year later, same date, is when the Rebbe accepted leadership. And the way the Rebbe signaled that he was accepting leadership was at the Farbrengen. He was Farbrengen the whole year. He was leading Farbrengens the whole year, but not as an official Rebbe. The way that everyone knew that he had officially accepted leadership is he said a maamar. A maamar is only said by a Rebbe. And the first maamar that Rebbe said began Basi LeGani. Basi LeGani is from Shir HaShirim, from Song of Songs. It means I've come into my garden. And more significantly, Basi LeGani is a maamar from the predecessor Rebbe. Now I should explain something. In the later years of the predecessor Rebbe's life, he was not speaking maamarim. He was not speaking so much in general because of health issues. But he continued to write, and he wrote many maamarim, to the extent that even after his passing, they were still coming out with Hasidic discourses that he had written. So, it happened to be, nothing happens to be, but this is how it happened. The predecessor Rebbe wrote a discourse called Basi LeGani that was scheduled to be distributed on the date of Yud Shvat, which turned out to become the day of his own passing. Okay? So basically that's, in a certain way, like an ethical will, a last will and testament. And so you understand that the maamar that the predecessor Rebbe wrote, which was dated the date of his own passing, the Rebbe then used that same maamar and repeated it a year later at the Farbrengen to signal that he was now Rebbe and was saying maamarim. And what he did was he took the maamar of his father-in-law. He basically, at the beginning, he's repeating it almost verbatim, and then diverges into his own commentary, which, by the way, became the Rebbe's style throughout all the years. Most of the Rebbe's maamarim, the Rebbe will take a maamar from one of his predecessors, one of the previous Rebbes, and give more detailed explanation. A lot of the Rebbe's style is commentary on the maamarim of the previous Rebbes. So that's what the Rebbe did the first official Farbrengen. And then every year, Yud Shvat, there would be an anniversary Farbrengen. And the Rebbe would continue to say a maamar, Basi LeGani. But it wasn't the same Basi LeGani. What was the Rebbe doing? So I should explain the concept of a hemshech. A hemshech means a continuation or a serial. You know, like in the magazine when they have like a story and it says to be continued? A serial? Okay. So some maamarim are standalone, other maamarim are serials. Basi LeGani was part of a serial of 20 chapters. And what the Rebbe did was each year, the Rebbe would repeat the Basi LeGani maamar, but focus in on another one of the chapters of the 20 chapters of the previous Rebbe's serial. So, in other words, just to make sure this is very clear to you, Tafshin Yud Aleph, which was the first year that Rebbe did his own Basi LeGani, not that anyone realized it at the time, it was focused on the first chapter of the previous Rebbe's Basi LeGani. In Tafshin Yud Beis, 5712, 1952, the Rebbe said his own Basi LeGani, and it was primarily focused on the second chapter of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Basi LeGani. And then in Tafshin Yud Gimel, 5713, 1953, the Rebbe said another Basi LeGani was primarily focused on chapter 3. Very good. Until the Rebbe got to the 20th chapter, and I told you there's only 20 chapters. And then what did the Rebbe do the next year? Started again. Very good. Went back to chapter 1. So we pick up from this that there's this concept of cycling through the 20 chapters in a 20-year cycle. And as such, we continue that cycle. So this year is Tafshin. No one knows the year. Pei Dalet. Tafshin Pei Dalet. 5784. As such, we are, you're close. 14th. We're on the 14th chapter. So, the same chapter that the Rebbe studied in depth in Tafshin Chof Daled, that's 5724 or 1964, is the same chapter that Rebbe studied in depth in Tafshin Mem Daled, that's 5744 or 1984. And that would have also corresponded to 2004 as well as to 2024, which it's about a couple weeks away, but 2024. Okay, so you understand this year this year of Yud Shvat, which is coming up in a few weeks. And what we want to do is use this class as our opportunity to prepare for Yud Shvat, the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat, which is, as I mentioned, the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe and the day that the Rebbe officially accepted leadership. And the way we're going to prepare for it is to study the Rebbe's explanation of the 14th chapter of the 20-chapter Basi LeGani serial. And so I had to make a choice. Okay, so that, I think I did it. I said I wanted to do a 5-minute background. I think that was 5 minutes. Okay.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
When we're talking about the Rebbe, we're talking about the Ramash.
Ramash, yeah.
Stands for
His name, yeah.
Singer
Yeah, his first name, his last name, yeah.
He's the 7th Rebbe. He's, okay, just wanted to make sure.
Correct. Okay. Now, I had to make a decision. We couldn't learn both Tafshin Chof Daled and Tafshin Mem Daled because we don't have enough time. I think we have about 4 classes until Yud Shvat, and I knew we could only cover one of the 2 maamarim. I have this. I sent you a PDF and the class WhatsApp. People watching on YouTube are like, I didn't get a WhatsApp. Well, you're not, it's a local thing. Okay. But if you're watching online, I will post a link to the PDF in the description of this video. This is a little pamphlet put out by Kohos. And I actually picked this up at the Oil. I was at the Oil for Shabbos, the Shabbos before Hey Tavis. And I picked this up from the Oil. I brought this all the way home. 4 miles away, yes. Okay, so Tovshin Chof Dalid, Basi LeGani Tovshin Chof Dalid. I looked it over, and I'm not going to count how many pages it is because that's too much math, but it's 9 chapters, and it goes from page 14 to 31. It's like 17 pages. Okay, so then, I know this sounds terrible. This is how I decided it, but Basi LeGani Tovshin Mem Dalid is from page 33 in this pamphlet to 41. It's much shorter. Okay, so I figured we could actually finish it. That's why I chose. So you're going to say to me, why did you choose Tovshin Mem Dalid, not Tovshin Chof Dalid? Because I felt we could finish it. That's why. That was the basis of the decision. Okay. So here we go. In the PDF, it's on page Lamed Gimel, which I believe in the PDF does correspond to page 33, because I think the cover page is page 1 of the PDF. It should work out that way. Yeah, it does. Okay, and you see there, which says B'siyata Dishmaya, Shabbos Pashas B'Shalach. This was on Shabbos, so there's no recording of it. It was memorized and transcribed after the fact. Yud Shvat Tovshin Dalid Mem. It says Dalid Mem instead of Mem Dalid because Mem Dalid has a negative connotation. Shin Mem Dalid, yeah, it means destruction. So we don't. Yeah, so we don't write that. We write Tovshin Dalid Mem. Right. Okay. Hanocha Bilti Muga. Hanocha Bilti Muga means it was not edited by the Rebbe. That means it's to the best recollection of the team of scholars. This is what the Rebbe said, but the Rebbe did not edit it and go over it. And the original Basi LeGani is edited, but this is not. Okay. Basi LeGani Echesi Kale. So here are the famous opening words. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. This is, again, I told you this is a verse from where? Shir Shirim. Who's speaking in this verse? Hashem is speaking. He's speaking to his beloved bride. Who's his bride? Us, the Jewish people. And when did this happen? When did he say, I came, honey, I'm home? When did he say that? When they built the Mishkan. When they built the physical sanctuary in the wilderness. He said, I'm back to the physical world. Now, what's going to happen is that Rebbe is going to review the first 13 chapters of the maamar, and then we'll get up to a point where we're ready to delve into a more focused analysis of chapter 14. I don't think today we'll get up to the part that focuses on 14. I think today mostly will be the review where the Rebbe is reminding us of some of the main points of the maamar. Okay. And the Rebbe says, and my father-in-law, the Rebbe, whose yahrzeit is today, says in his maamar that starts with these words, and this maamar that Rebbe mentions was given out on the day of his passing. So the previous Rebbe says in his maamar that was released for the day of his passing, it says in Medrash Rabbah on this verse, LeGani Lignuni. LeGani Lignuni, little wordplay. LeGani, to my garden, Lignuni, to my bridal canopy. LeMakom shoya ikri b'tchila, to the place that was my main place at the beginning. What does that mean? The ikar shchina b'tachtenim haisa, that the main shchina. And what is the main shechina as opposed to the other shechinas? That is something that is explained at length in Basi LeGani Tovshin Yud Aleph, where the Rebbe focuses on the first chapter of the 20 chapters. But basically it means There are levels of Shekhinah. You guys who learned Tanya with me remember levels of Shekhinah. So when we say the main Shekhinah, we mean the main Shekhinah, not just levels of it, but the essence, the most essential Shekhinah. Where was it? It was on the physical earth. In Gan Eden, when Hashem created the world, so in the Garden of Eden, there was the highest level of godly revelation down here on the lowest level of creation in the physical world. Okay. But what happened? Through 7 negative events, the Shekhinah left, it was repelled all the way to the 7th heaven. And the Rebbe doesn't enumerate specifically here, but in the original maamar, it quotes the Medrash more fully, and it mentions each generation. First was the sin of Adam with the tree of knowledge, and then it was Cain's murder of Abel, and then the generation of Enosh worshiping idols. And basically, the Shekhinah was repelled level after level away from the world. And then afterwards, 7 righteous people stood up, starting from Avram Avinu, Echad Hoyu Avram, who was the one and only, he was the only person in the world like him, and began drawing the Shekhinah back down from above to below. Until Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the seventh generation from Avraham, and like the Medrash says, and all 7ths are precious. Pause for a second. In the maamar that the Frierdiker Rebbe released to be, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to be released on the day of his passing, one of the things that maamar talks about is a concept from the Medrash that all 7ths are precious. It's a bit uncanny that with his passing, Frierdiker Rebbe's passing, he was the 6th Rebbe from the Alter Rebbe, so that began the 7th generation. So the Rebbe in his maamar focuses on this idea of the 7th generation from the Alter Rebbe, and basically draws upon the text of his father-in-law's maamar, which was released on that very date, that emphasizes this concept of Kol Shvi and Chavivin. All 7ths are precious. And the Rebbe says there basically that, look, it's not because we're so great, it's not because we're so talented, but hey, we're the 7th generation, and we're precious, and that means we have a special mission. Okay, so this concept, all 7ths are precious, it comes from the fact Moses was the 7th generation from Abraham, and therefore he was the one who made that the difference. The Shekhinah was being brought down incrementally by Avram and then Yitzchak and then Yankiv, but the one that made the real difference, who brought it from the heavens to the earth, was the 7th. It was Moshe who brought the Shekhinah down to the physical world. When? Where? In the wilderness, in the Mishkan, in the physical sanctuary. Moshe was the one who brought the Shekhinah down to the earth. Be'elam hazat tachtein, to the physical world, she'ein tachtein lamata mimeno, and there is no plane of existence lower than it. Now the main way in which this drawing down of the Shekhinah was expressed was in the Mishkan. Like Hashem says in the Torah, make for me a mikdash, make for me a physical sanctuary, and I will dwell within them, within them. The dwelling within the physical structure. The Mishkan that was made from 13 or 15, depending on the opinion you follow, physical, not ingredients, not baking a cake, materials, building materials. B'seicham kipshutai. And Hashem says, I will dwell within them, b'seicham, within them, literally, within the Jewish people. And this And by dwelling in the Mishkan, this causes the Hashem is dwelling within each and every individual Jew, as the Medrash explains. Okay, so all of this is still reviewing the original Basi LeGani. And in fact, it's reviewing the first chapter of the original Basi LeGani. This is the meaning of the verse from Tilim, from chapter 37 of Psalms, that tzaddikim, the righteous, will inherit the earth and dwell forever upon it. What does it mean they will dwell? Actually, it means they will cause Hashem's presence to dwell on the earth. They'll take Hashem, who is the Sheikhin Ad Morim V'Kadosh, the one who dwells forever on high, and bring him down here to dwell on earth. Lamata ba'aretz, Aleha ba'ofen shel lo ad, that Hashem's presence should eternally dwell down here on the physical plane. Be'efen nitzchi, in an eternal way. V'hainu lefi sha'amshacha hi al yidei ha'aveda de Torah mitzvahs v'atorah hi nitzchas. And why will it be eternal? Because the mechanism through which we draw Hashem down to the world is through Torah, and Torah is eternal. Havayim leich leilam vad, and then Hashem will rule forever. And this process began, the process of drawing Hashem down to the physical world, which obviously we're talking about Mashiach, but the process began with Moshe Rabbeinu making the Mishkan, and as we know, like our sages tell us, all the works of the hands of Moshe are eternal. Anything that Moshe built still exists. It's still intact. Yes. So, okay, that's the end of chapter 1. Just to review very quickly. So in this chapter, the Rebbe starts us off as the custom, Basi LeGani. Then the Rebbe reviews some of the main points from the beginning of his father-in-law's maamar. And the main points, like we said, are that Basi LeGani Chesikala, Hashem is saying, when the Mishkan was built, I've come home, this is my place, I've come back, I've returned. That when he created the world, he was here in the physical world. Through different sins, the Shekhinah was repelled incrementally further and further away. And then through a process, a 7-generation process, the Shekhinah was incrementally brought back until finally Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the 7th, was the one who brought the Shekhinah back to the earth, which means that there was a revelation of godliness here on the physical plane, specifically in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, but that also caused there to be a revelation b'seicham within them, within the individual Jews. Okay, that's chapter 1.
What is that?
What?
I missed that. You threw Mashiach in at the end.
Well, we're trying to finish this process. The process began, where does Mashiach figure into this? The process began when Moshe Rabbeinu built the Mishkan and brought the Shekhinah into the physical sanctuary. Okay? So that's the beginning of bringing Hashem's presence into the physical world. The ultimate, meaning the completion of that process, is Mashiach, when the whole world will be a place where God's presence is revealed. So we're using this concept of the Mishkan, where Hashem said, Basi LeGani, I'm back, I've returned, as sort of the precedent for what we're driving at, what our goal is. This is our purpose. And when the Rebbe says, I mentioned the idea of Kol Shvi and Chavivin, we're the Dor Shvi, the 7th generation. We have to be like Moses' generation, who was the 7th generation from Abraham. That's really how the Rebbe applies it. He's saying, what does it mean that we're the 7th? It means we're the ones who finished the job. Meaning, if starting from the Alter Rebbe, starting from the Tanya, Hashem became a little bit more revealed in the world, it's our job as the 7th generation to make Hashem completely revealed in the world. And another way of describing that shorthand is Mashiach. Okay. Chapter 2. And if you're following in the PDF, it's on page Lamed Daled. Yeah, we're good? All right. Fine. Ois Beis, chapter 2. V'hinei al pi maamar zal yedu ala pasuk neder lilal b'nei adam. Now there's a verse from Tilim, from Psalms, Samach Vov, chapter 66, verse 5. You can look it up. The words, Neida Alila al B'nai Adam, a terrible libel or slander against the children of man, humanity. So, Chassidus explains that it is speaking about literally B'nai Adam, the children of Adam Harishon, the descendants of the first man, meaning all of us. That the first man was set up. It was a setup, it was entrapment. That the Chet Eitz Hadas, the sin of the tree of knowledge, was unavoidable. And although certainly there was free choice involved, and certainly therefore there's human accountability involved, at the same time, it could not have been avoided. It was a setup. That's why we say, Neida Alila B'nai Adam. It's a terrible libel that was brought against humanity, because really there was no way this was not going to happen. Move on, it's understood. These 7 negative occurrences that we mentioned in the first 7 generations of humanity, and how the Shekhinah was being repelled. It was on purpose. It was part of the plan. It was part of the plan. Apparently, Hashem set things up that the Shekhinah should start off being here, but then it should be pushed away one level after another. That was all part of the plan. V'hainu, that is to say, Shirida Zuhi Tzarich Aliyah. This descent was for the sake of a subsequent greater ascent. Don't get confused by, if you're a spatial person and you're like, how is it a descent? The Shekhinah is going up and away. What we mean is a qualitative descent, meaning the further away the Shekhinah is getting from the world, then the lower the world is descending into physicality. But every descent is for the sake of a subsequent greater ascent. Like you crouch down in order to be able to leap up higher than if you would just jump from a standing position. And this is an axiom within Torah, especially in Chassidus, especially in the Rebbe's teachings. A descent is only for the sake of a greater ascent. So the fact that the Shekhinah was here, and then we lost it. In fact, we lost it more and more every generation until it started coming back. That's not a bug, it's a feature. It was planned, and it's part of the process, indispensably part of the process. Okay. Bichdei, this descent was for the sake of an ascent, bichdei, in order, sham shachas iker shchina betachtenim tia ayedei aveded Yisrael. Follow that, very important concept. That the Shekhinah, being in the physical world, should be through the work of the Jewish people. In other words, the Shekhinah was here to begin with, but how did it get here?
Just
Hashem put it here. After we bring it back, that's a big difference. It's not just the Shekhinah was here, then it was gone, now it's back. Zero-sum game, nothing changed. No. It's very different. $1 million that was given to you is totally different than $1 million that you earned.
So why do you have the Shekhinah here to begin with? If it's a descent for the ascent, really for the descent.
That's a great question. Meaning, if it had to be earned, so start from zero.
Yeah.
Why give it to you, make you lose it, and then make you earn it back?
Right.
I love that question. Let's savor it.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer it, but that's a great place to be with that question. Okay. Why does it have to be a return? Why does it have to be a reinstatement? If we're going to lose it, just don't give it to us to begin with. Yeah, that's great. I'm not going to answer that. Okay. All right. So that it has to come about through the Avodah of Yisrael. Achesi kala, my sister, my bride, right? In that verse, Basi LeGani, achesi kala, Hashem is speaking to his beloved. He's using pet names to describe us. In terms of endearment. But the guy went on his honeymoon to Niagara Falls. You can tell this is an old joke. And he checks into the hotel, the honeymoon suite, and there's this old couple there in front of them checking in. And this young groom overhears this elderly gentleman speaking to his wife, and he says, "Honey, do you want me to check us in? Dear, which room would you like? Sweetie, could I get your bags?" And when the older wife is out of earshot, the young man says to the older man, he says, "I notice you use these wonderful terms of endearment, honey, sweetie, dolly, baby. I mean, how do you keep the spark alive?" He says, "I can't remember her name." Okay. So Hashem says, "Achesi, Kala, my sister, my bride." These are terms of endearment. So Basi LeGani, Achesi Kala, I've come back to my place. This is my place, Hashem says. I love the physical world. This is my home. I've come back. I'm back to my place. And why am I back here? Because you, my dear, you made it possible. It's not a bachelor pad that I went and I bought some $20 million condo in Tribeca, and no way. It's my wife made a home for me. You understand the difference? Okay, fine. Key. Hamshachas ika shchina b'tachtonim sh'ayidei aved Yisrael hi nailis yesem mikmesha hoysem etzad atzma betchilas habriya. Just take this as axiomatic, that the dwelling place in the lower realms for the Shekhinah that exists through Jewish people bringing it about is qualitatively greater, incomparably so, than how it was when Hashem just put it here in the first place. V'tam adavar, and the reason. Kevan sham shachash lachrei silok naises ayidei aved dis hapcha chashechel in hayra. When the Shekhinah gets brought back after it's departed, it comes about through the transformation of darkness to light. The only way to bring the Shekhinah back once it's been lost is through transforming darkness to light. When the darkness turns into light, this is the only way to make an advantage in the light. I should explain this concept because there's a verse from Kehelis of Yisana Oyer min HaCheshech, the advantage of light over dark. So there are a few different ways of understanding that concept. One is light is better than dark. It takes Solomon to tell me that. Yeah, I know. I don't want to bump into things. Light is better than dark. Then there's another way of explaining it. Well, Yisana Oyer min HaCheshech, that you appreciate light because of dark. That if there wouldn't be dark, there wouldn't be light. Oh, that's a little deeper. Still not the deepest explanation. Yisana Oyer min HaCheshech. The advantage of light, not better than dark. This preposition, min, can mean than. It can also mean from. The advantage of light that comes from dark. Light that's made out of dark. The transformation of dark into light. Meaning to say, you start off with a certain quantity of light. And that's what it is, whatever it is. Assign the value X. And that's the totality of light. You can't have any more than that. Now imagine, not only do you have that, but also all the darkness becomes a new type of light that used to be darkness. Now you have even more light.
Is it like the Averos that become mitzvahs?
The Averos that become mitzvahs, yeah, from chapter 8 of Tanya, the Zdenis Nasale Kazachias, is a great personal example of that. Correct. Great. That's an example of that concept. We're speaking about it here probably more in the macrocosm, about the world lost something and became darkened, but it's not just reinstating the light that was lost, it's then taking that darkness itself and turning it into new light. If you can follow that concept. It's a little bit mind-bendy.
I'm a little confused.
What does that look like?
Isn't that from like what we just learned for Hanukkah?
Yeah, we did learn that in the Hanukkah maamar. We can't assume that everybody was at that class or even people who were there remember it. But yes, we did speak about the transformation of darkness into light, turning darkness itself, not just replacing darkness with light, but turning the darkness itself into light. Correct.
talking about 7 here, but it's really we want to get to 8.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I have to make a chart over here. That's a good point. Okay.
But I am a little bit confused.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the Shechina was here.
Shechina was here.
The Shechina was here.
Yeah.
It went back up.
Yeah.
And then it came back with the Mishkan.
Well, it came back step by step. Avram brought it down from the 7th heaven to the 6th, and Yitzchak from the 6th to the 5th, and so on and so forth, until it was poised to return to the world. It was hovering in that in the closest, what do you call it? Proximate. Yeah, I think the word is proximate, not approximate. Proximate. The closest. The heaven which is closest to earth, meaning the first one.
Yeah.
Rikiah Aleph. Moshe Rabbeinu brought it from there down to the physical world through building the Mishkan, the physical structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did it leave?
Chet ha'egel, the sin of the golden calf. Yeah.
That's when it left before.
I'm sorry, no. The Mishkan was actually a tikkun after the Chet ha'egel, but from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash.
I'm a little confused. So it came back.
It's
down?
been back and forth a bunch of
Right,
times.
so
Yeah,
where
yeah.
is it now?
Well, that's a great question. Where is it now?
That's my.
And it would seem, if we're to follow these parallels, that it's right behind the door. It's like, because we're entering history with all the previous generations' work, and we just have to that tipping point, the Shekhinah it's almost ready to come back to the physical world.
Okay. So we got to be the 7th generation.
Yeah, we have to be the 7th generation.
We are the
We are the 7th generation, right. We have to live like it, yeah. Which means to accept that our job is to finish the job. How can we finish the job? We're not so great. Well, we're just finishing it. It's like when the pickle jar is on too tight and I try to open it, I can't open it, and then after an hour of trying to open it, I give it to my wife and she opens it. But she could only open it because I loosened it up. Okay. So the transformation of darkness into light, we're actually gaining the yisana or the advantage, actually more light, new light, a special type of light that's not just light from light, but light from dark. And you gave a great example of what it means on a personal level, like taking your spiritual failures and turning them into a springboard to gain even greater spiritual sensitivity. That's a great example of what it's like in a person's experience. Okay. So that's the advantage that needed to be gained. That's the ascent that is gained through the descent. All right. So we call that ishapcha. Remember that word, ishapcha, transformation. Parentheses. Bedugmas ha'iloi d'tshuva lagabi avedas hatzedikim. For instance, an example of this would be the superiority of tshuva over the aveda of a tzaddik. The tzaddik never has any relationship to darkness, not even internally, not even as a potential, not even as a temptation, which is beautiful. He's so pure. But because he has no connection to darkness, then he can't elevate the darkness. The Baal Tshuva, unfortunately, did have a connection to darkness, but now is capable of not just getting rid of it, but repurposing it, turning it into an asset.
That was the whole point of maamar.
That's also, yeah, you're connecting all the maamarim we learned. Okay.
And the makom shabal yeshuva.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, by the way, Torah Chassidus has very consistent themes. So when you learn more and more maamarim, you'll be like, oh, we learned that in this maamar, we learned that in that maamar. And it's true because there are certain consistent themes. Yes, and this is one of the big ones, transformation of darkness into light.
Is that part of the code?
The code. You mean Torah being a code?
We spoke about the world is created through.
Through the code. The world itself is Torah.
DNA.
Yeah, the DNA, yeah, it is, and that's why you see it so much. It's part of the code of Torah, and that's why it occurs in the world. Okay, Kemaimer, like the saying, Kad iskafya sitra achra, when one subjugates the negativity It causes the glory of Hashem to rise up, to be elevated in all worlds. Through the Aveda of Iskafia, that's subjugation, and Ishapcha, transformation. You know the difference between subjugation and transformation?
No.
Well, let's figure it out. Subjugation, transformation of what?
The dark.
The dark.
Light.
Okay, so subjugation.
Into the dark.
What's subjugation of the dark?
Put yourself in it.
Subjugation of it is to not let it get to you, to push it down, to push it away. So you have a desire that's not for God, you ignore it, and you say, no, that's not going to express itself, not today. That's called iskafia. Ishapcha is transformation, where you actually take the negative and turn it into a positive. You rechannel it.
What does that mean? Can you give an example?
We did though. We spoke about ishapcha at length.
What's just like a
3 minutes ago. Think about 3 minutes ago. What did we say? Well, it's the classic.
You're asking for practical.
We did say practical.
you're talking about
Remember 3 minutes? Yeah.
No, but okay, so what's
Yeah.
an example of that?
An example? You mean you want me to give you a suggestion of an Aveda that you could do and then do tshuva on?
Like, what's an
I won't
example-
suggest Avedas,
Like
no.
when we leave
The
from
Yetzer Hara
here
does that.
and
I don't do
keep
that.
going through our day.
So iskafia is when you don't let the darkness get to you.
Okay.
Ishapcha is when it's a higher level and it's a more difficult level where you actually do the judo move and you take the energy and you flip it into something good.
So instead of getting sucked into the news and all the negativity and what's going on,
Right.
turn
You
it
take
into
that
this
itself and turn it into purpose.
Okay.
Right?
Versus just saying I'm not going to watch
Pushing away the feeling of not getting
Right,
depressed.
that's aggressive.
So you're just using the energy to do something. You're not transforming like your depression. You just don't want to feel that, so you're busying yourself with doing something positive. You're not like really living the darkness.
No, you don't delve into the darkness. No. That's okay. So I'm glad that you're bringing this up. When we talk about ishapcha, we're not talking about purposely visiting the darkness and embracing the darkness. That's very dangerous and damaging. What we're talking about is we already have a certain amount of darkness that's just part of our lives and part of the fabric of the universe. It's embedded in reality. Like we said, Neira Alila al Bnei Adam, Hashem set up the world in such a way where this darkness is already part of our collective history, and it's already part of our individual lives. So we're not like reveling in this darkness. What we're saying is we know it's there. We know that it could, God forbid, ruin us. Iskafia is I'm not going to let it ruin me. Ishapcha is can I take the potential for it to ruin me and to rechannel it towards something positive. Okay, let's keep going. Through the Aved of Iskafia v'Ishapcha, Nimshach Gilu Eir Naila B'Yeser, we draw down a greater light. Sha'ofen Agili Shalayhu B'Bichinis Reimamus. He calls it Reimamus, which means an exalted light, a higher light. Shalachin Nikra B'Shem Istalik, that's why it uses the term Istalik, which means to elevate or to go up, a higher grade of revelation. V'zeu gam shascholas asiyas hamishkan hi be'inyan akroshim. This is also why they made the Mishkan out of kroshim. What are kroshim? Kuf, reish, shin, kerish. What is a kerish? What? Who said that? Who? Where? Plank. That is the best translation. I don't think I would have thought of that. Yes, they were planks. Vertical planks. You ever seen the Mishkan? I mean, not in real life, but you seen pictures of it? Okay. So the Mishkan was made, the primary structure of there were a lot of different materials, but the primary structure, the walls, were made out of these things called kroshim, planks. Great translation. Okay. The kerish hu oisius sheker. Kerish, plank, is kuf, reish, shin. You take the letters and rearrange them, a little anagram here, and you get shin, kuf, reish, which is sheker. Sheker is falsehood or a lie. What's the biggest lie? The biggest lie is you live in a world and you don't see God. The lack of revelation of God is the lie. What's the truth? Godly revelation is the truth. So what are we going to create the revelation of God from? Meaning the truth. From a keresh, which is sheker, which is the lie. In other words, we're going to take a world that makes it look like it is ontologically independent, it's just here, it just exists. Creation without a creator. You know, the big lie that the predictability of nature seems to help reinforce. And from the physicality, from the place of divine concealment, that itself becomes fertile ground to express the greatest revelation of Hashem, even more than Hashem is revealed in the heavens. Elashu b'tzirav acher. Acher daike, hepech inyan echod. Sheker is the rearrangement of the letters of keresh with a tziraf acher, another rearrangement. And he says another, that itself is a deep concept. Acher as opposed to echod. Echod means the oneness, overt oneness. Acher means anything other than the oneness. And what we're saying is even the otherness, this is an example of darkness that turns into light. There is no real otherness. So the appearance of otherness actually only serves to ultimately reinforce the oneness. Because when you have oneness that's all unchecked oneness, it's not as clearly one as when you have oneness that appears to also coexist with otherness, and then you find out even the otherness was only the oneness. Wow, that's an even greater degree of oneness. What? The world, yeah. The world is the seeming apparent otherness, which is actually oneness. Now, these kroshim, these planks, were atze shitim aimdim, standing planks of acacia wood. I don't really know botanically if that's accurate. I just know that many years ago when I was a young man and the first time I learned this maamar, they told me that atze shittim is acacia wood. That's, sometimes I also heard it was cedar wood. I think maybe acacia wood is a species of cedar wood. I don't know. You can come back next week and let me know, and you can bring pictures. At any rate, I know that there were these really tall trees, these super tall trees that are really great for building. And that's what the Mishkan was made out of. But that's not the point. For sure there is something to be learned if we would delve into the actual physical species of wood. But right now we're going to talk about the name of this wood. They are called atze shittim. Shittim is the name. And what does that allude to? Hainu to transform the falseness of the world into a plank, a building material for a house for God. Ves hashtus, see that word shtus? Shtus is folly. That's also how I was taught to translate shtus. But you know what? I've never used the word folly in real life. Yeah. Foolishness. Yeah, nonsense, shtus is like foolish nonsense, but also it means deviation. Really what it means is, deviation. To go off, to bend off path. So to take shtus de lumazeh means of the other side, the negative side, lishtus dikdusha, and turn it into holy shtus, atze shittim, and that's why the kaddish is made from atze shittim, because it alludes to this, the idea of taking the negative deviation and turning it into a positive deviation. What does that mean? It means you're not going to be normal. So you could be worse than normal or you can be better than normal. Your deviation could be that you are deviated below what is the good way to be, or you could be deviated in a way where you are above the normal way to be. In other words, shtus de kedusha means you're not going to be normal anyway. So be weird in a way that serves God.
But if everything is God, all
Yeah.
the Echad, then there is no deviation.
Okay. So the thing is like this. You're asking a very deep question. The original maamar that the Rebbe is reviewing here. By the way, the Rebbe is still reviewing the first chapter of Basi LeGani. It speaks about the idea that, and the Frierdiker Rebbe is speaking in 1950 and living in America, and he's talking about how people are very locked into their ways, into their what they think is normal and what they think is proper. And if you really think about like 1950s America, you know, who the Frierdiker Rebbe was speaking to at that time, you really understand why that was like an issue. And he's saying, look, we all from time to time have these deviations where we go off the normal path. So anyways, you're deviating. So turn that into something where you're doing something unconventional for the sake of Yiddishkeit, for the sake of Hashem. In other words, go out of the box, be a little unconventional, take a risk, do something bold in a way that makes God's presence more appreciated in this world. So you're talking about a deviation. Yeah, what we're talking about is from the perspective of the world. In the world, people are looking at you, and there is something called the norm. And even according to Taub, there's something called a norm. And in fact, he's decrying that as well. When a person says, look, I'll just be Jewish following the letter of the law. I don't have to be too intense. I don't have to get carried away. So he's saying, no, you do have to be intense and carried away. You do have to go above and beyond. And the point here is the transformation of Sheker into Kiddush, taking the lie of the world and turning it into a home for Hashem, is through atzei shitim, through shtus, through going above and beyond and doing something unconventional and crazy.
What's an example of that?
Something unconventional and crazy? Standing at the train station with menorahs and saying, excuse me, are you Jewish? Do you have a menorah? That's embarrassing and cringy and weird, and no normal person wants to do that. And it's an incredible example of...
2023, that's normative because of Chabad.
Oh, you're right. We made it normal. So now we have to, now we have to find a new boundary to push. Okay, you're right. All right. Shayideze. I'm going to finish up here. Shayideze naisam shachas ikar shchina b'tachtenim. That through this, what we just described, we draw down the main shchina into the physical world in a manner greater than it was at first. So we're not just putting things back. You broke it, you fix it. No. We're not just putting things back to the way it was. What would be the point of that? We're making things better than it's ever been. So that means that when we, through going out of our comfort zone, bring the Shekhinah back to the world, it will be in a greater manner of godly revelation here in the physical world than it even was in Gan Eden when Hashem first was at home in this physical world. Okay, now that's the end of Ois Beis of chapter 2. If you look at the beginning of chapter 3, it starts with the words Umamshich behamaimer. He continues in the discourse. And that's where the Rebbe will start to summarize chapter 10. Now, remember, which chapter are we going to focus on for this year? 14. So basically what the Rebbe does in this maamar is summarizes chapter 1, just to sort of get us back into the general flow of things. Then summarizes chapter 10 or 10, 11, and 12 and 13 to like get us into the chapters that ramp up into 14. And then focuses on 14. So what have we covered so far? Just one. We reviewed chapter 1. Next week, God willing, we'll review what happens in chapters 10, 11, 12, 13, and maybe even get into the analysis of chapter 14. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're all going to leave from here.
Yeah.
Any suggestion on how to take whatever we just learned and make it tangible?
You want some homework?
I want homework,
Get out of your comfort zone. That's
I
Okay.
want to be told and spoon-fed, like, this is what you need to do.
Okay, well,
Practically
wrong
speaking.
person.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
Exactly. Yeah, because I don't like to spoon feed. But
I know.
what was the suggestion for homework?
So just get out of your comfort zone.
A little shtus to kedusha. You could get out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
Spiritual comfort
Yeah.
zone.
Yeah. 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 That's I think that's good homework. A little shtus to kedusha. Do something that's out of your comfort zone, out of the norm that you're doing for Hashem.